Also today, developing nations have walked out of talks aimed at reaching an agreement at COP29 in Azerbaijan. Negotiators worked through the night in an effort to secure a deal, with disagreement over how much money the world's leading economies will give to poorer nations to help tackle climate change. Well, let's get more on this now with our climate reporter Victoria Seabrook. She has been in Baku for us throughout COP29 and is there for us today. Victoria, quite a turn of events. Clearly, they want to make their voice heard by walking out.
Yes, exactly. We're now well into overtime at the COP29 climate talks, and it's feeling very precarious. You can probably see some people running behind me. We've had people walking out of the specific talks in the room behind me. People, I have to say, tensions really boiling over now. The key thing the key thing that's dividing countries at the moment is this funding target to pay for climate measures in developing nations. A group of vulnerable island states and the least developed group of countries, which includes a lot of countries in Africa which are extremely vulnerable to climate change, things like drought, they just walked out of the negotiations. They want a specific portion of the new target to be allocated to them because previously similar kinds of targets, the money actually has not flowed to some of the most vulnerable people. They've been calling for that all along, but it really took a very long time for these negotiations to get going. We are well into overtime. They're 2 weeks long, but we only got the first semblance of a deal yesterday, and that's when the real negotiations kick in, because if there's nothing on the table, there's nothing for them to sort of debate over. So I have to say that negotiations now feeling, and the state of getting deals feeling even more precarious than they were this morning.
Baku in Azerbaijan, thank you. Well, our science and technology editor Tom Clark's been looking at the battle to stop this year's COP becoming a flop.
After 2 weeks of deadlock, hopes for a positive outcome in Baku are fading. Some of the blame is directed at the organisers, Azerbaijan. The talks, after all, getting off to a less than auspicious start, with its president praising his country's fossil fuel wealth.
It's a gift of the God. Every natural resource, whether it's oil, gas, wind, sun, gold, silver, copper, all that are natural resources.
But much of the blame lies with the rich world, because these talks are about money, those most responsible for climate change helping pay others to fix it. Look at historical carbon emissions, and the US and the EU have burned the most and grown the richest from doing so. China and India are gaining fast, but want help not to repeat our industrial history. But it's poor countries most vulnerable to climate change that have the least responsibility for causing it. Chad's historical emissions, 9,000 times less, for example, than the United States. Money should help people in the southern hemisphere exposed to severe heat, droughts and floods with the least money to adapt. Rich countries should, for example, pay for a solar farm in Haiti instead of a coal-fired power plant, or plant trees in Kenya to absorb carbon and combat extreme heat. But the estimated bill for all of this is eye-watering. The talks in Baku have agreed that at least $1.3 trillion in climate finance is needed each year by 2035. The row, of course, is where that money is going to come from. It took rich countries 12 years to honour a previous commitment to come up with $100 billion a year in climate finance, and that was cobbled together from various sources. But the money that's being put on the table at the very end of these talks in Baku is way too little, according to the countries that were promised it.
It's the most disappointing outcome we've ever had. This is a slap in the face for developing countries. It can't be accepted. Just because developed countries put it on the table is not good enough a reason for developing countries to fall for it. And I don't expect any developing countries to fall for such low ambition.
These talks always end in carefully worded compromise, but it's hard to fudge a number. Whatever the outcome in Baku, it will reflect how seriously the world really takes the dangers of climate change.
We have some breaking news to bring you in relation to the weather, and a man has died after a tree has fallen on a car on the A34. Police say that they were called to reports of a tree falling on a car early this morning at 7:47 a.m. That was between Kingsworthy and Winnall. They are appealing for witnesses or anyone with dash cam footage who may have been on the A34 this morning after that fatal incident. They go on to say a driver of a black Mercedes E350, a man in his 60s, has been confirmed deceased at the scene. His family have been informed by officers. A silver Skoda Kodiaq was also damaged, but no other injuries have been reported. There have been lengthy lane closures, of course, in place while emergency services work at the scene, and they want to thank motorists for their patience as they continue to work on the scene there. We would now like to speak to anyone with information about this incident, and particularly anyone with relevant dash cam footage. So amidst Storm Bert, sadly, a man has died when a tree fell on his car this morning on the A34 between Kingsworthy and Winnall.